Hello and welcome to another episode of the Belair podcast. If you've ever heard about chakras, you're interested in chakras, energy, all kinds of fun stuff, this is going to be an episode you are going to want to watch. If you're listening to this on iTunes, definitely check out the Belair channel to see the visual because you're going to need it for this one. Today's guest is my friend. I met him in Las Vegas. He is the visionary behind the Delphi Village project. Him and I have had some amazing conversations in his home. He always blows my mind. He's one of my good friends, and he's always interesting to talk to. I'm so excited to have him back on again. Welcome back to the show, Sean Brown.
Thanks, Matt. Definitely looking forward to yet another awesome conversation because they have been so awesome every single time.
Yeah, man. So, well, today we're talking a little bit, you have such an interesting, your whole house is, you've got these whiteboards mapped out. You've got your bookshelf behind you there. I'll click it so people can see it. And I enjoyed perusing your books and seeing all this information that's in there. But you're mapping out the way that you understand chakras is a lot different than most people. So I guess I would start for the question. Like, I have an idea of what they are. I see them as energy centers in the body.
Yep.
When I went to Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talked about how that each chakra, energy system in the body, has its own neural network, a neural cluster. So they're like miniature brains.
Yeah, totally.
And I've also heard it before. There's like recently that it's even more than that, like a brain, but like its own kind of life force, like this whole entity.
Right. It is. Both. It is both. Yes.
Yeah. So, the first question is, let's get into it and lay on some education on how you view the chakras and behind us.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's funny to hear us talking about chakras. I mean, my background is very technical on aviation and military and stuff like that. And it certainly isn't coming from the idea of spirituality or the Vedas or any of these types of, ancient wisdom systems or anything like that. But about 2012, I started through a journey of self-discovery, the processes of unrevealing. I started perceiving this map in a sense. It was a more basic form of this map over here. But I literally sat one day in my bathroom in front of the mirror, sat down cross-legged, and was, in a sense, seeing or sensing. Not like in Minority Report where Tom Cruise is seeing all the stuff, which is what I truly aspire to see these things. I truly want to turn on the one eye that's going to open myself to see. But what happens is without the visual seeing of it, there is a knowing of it. It's like I'm seeing them that way. And so I was seeing these nodes. I was seeing a pattern that was very crude, but it was that there were things here, and there were things here, and there were things here. And I noticed that for whatever reason, as I was bringing this through, that I was writing these symbols. And if you zoom in on them, you'll see there's things like Jupiter and Saturn and Mars. And it is basically the astrological and planetary symbols. So so as I was noticing them there, I was recognizing that there were certain patterns in them. The way that these, I have no background in astrology. I have no background in mythology. I have no background in symbols or anything that I'm aware of as looking at the occult or anything like that. It was just that these were coming to me. And I noticed that as I was drawing them down, there was only 4 different things I was drawing. There were crosses and circles and semicircles and arrows in this thing. And I was like, what are these things? What are these pieces parts? What do they mean? And frankly, Wikipedia, I look things up, I Google things, and I, pretty quickly, it comes up and you can see that they all, like the cross means earth or matter, and the semicircle means water or mind, and the arrow means desire or fire, and the circle means spirit or air. So they were just basically the elements, earth, water, fire, and air. And they were the subtle versions of that, the mind and ether and the desire and the spirit aspects of those gross, forms of that. And so each of these nodes in here ended up being comprised of different configurations of matter over spirit, or spirit over mind, or desire over spirit over mind. And as I was looking at these things, and again, I didn't understand the word chakras. I don't have a background in mythology or any of these things, but I'm noticing these things. I just more like recognizing patterns, really. And I'm looking at the similarities to what's kind of just existing out there when I Google or when I look at Wikipedia. And all of a sudden I noticed this structure, this pattern in here that was essentially earth, water, fire, air, and ether that was going up. From my root chakra, it was earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then from the Bindu or Indu chakra, it went earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So earth, water, fire, air, ether. And they were in pairs. This was literally the gross earth, the gross water, the gross fire, and the gross air, while this was up here, the subtle. If this is earth, this is ether or akasha, or the akashic record. This is water, or the subtle form of that is mind. This is fire, or the subtle form of that is desire or will. And then this is air, which is the subtle form of that is spirit. And so they were growing in pairs, first order, second order, third order, fourth order, and the fifth order was the etheric. That's the avatar in Airbender. The earth tribe, the water tribe, the fire tribe, the air tribe, which he was the last of the air tribe. And then to master all four of them, you get to become the master of the ether, which is the avatar. So those were aspects of the pattern that I was starting to notice. And again, everything I said, this has nothing to do with chakras so far, although I noticed that when people were talking about things, that's what they were talking about. I was like, oh my gosh. So I looked up things and I came across probably one of the most indispensable books in my entire library. And I have hundreds, I have a few thousand books here. But this one right here, Laya Yoga by Shyam Goswami. He is, and this is one you might recognize, these kind of pictures of chakras that you've seen on the internet. He's the one who commissioned these. And these were commissioned the way that he drew them. These aren't just like fantasy drawings from, they're just drawing something. This is, all of these pictures are different gods that are nested in order, that are described in all of these pages, which are highly cited through the Vedas, over in the yogas and the tantras and the sutras, and all of these different references that Goswami did. I mean, amazing. And what he ended up describing was something much further than just 7 chakras. I mean, if I go through the list in here, he probably just describes the 12 that I'd list. So he does. So this book, just a normal book you can get off of Amazon, will list these chakras in this order in here: the Muladhara, Svadhisthana, Manipura, Krit, Anahata, Vishuddha, Ajna, Manas, Indu, Nirvana, Guru, and Sahasrara. And there's a 13th one that hides in here between, right at your uvula, called the Talu or the Lana chakra. And so there's 12 plus that 13th chakra that make up an entire system. And I'm like, wait a second, where are those 7 chakras? I mean, the ones that everybody talks about, the 7 chakras are the root chakra, which is the Muladhara, the sexual chakra, the Svadhisthana, the Manipura, the solar plexus, the Anahata, the heart chakra, the throat chakra called the Vishuddha, the third eye, they call it, because it's the third dimension, but the third eye is the Ajna, and then they skip all these other ones and they go straight to the Sahasrara, which is the crown chakra. Okay, so those 7 chakras are the ones that pretty much all of us that are discussing chakras today are very familiar with. And it was very confusing to me for quite a while to figure out, okay, if they're all talking about these chakras and there's these 7, but then there's these that this guy is citing from countless sightings of all of these chakras and what each chakra does and how they're related, and all the gods and images that are created in those icons that are there. So as I started piecing it together, I started realizing, oh, okay, so Buddha says that there are 7 chakras, and when he's talking to animals, he's talking to 3-dimensional objects, contained volumes. That is what 7 chakras are required to give rise to these contained volumes. And so the people that he was talking to, who were not so necessarily intellectual, they were more animalistic in their developmental stages. They could perceive themselves as these contained volumes, but could not have evolved to the stages where they perceive themselves as both the contained volumes and the uncontained matrix that gives rise to the object. Okay, they're disconnected from it. Whereas some of us have reconnected with ourselves as identified the contained volume of this body, but then also the connectedness of the uncontained volume surrounding this body. That's our fourth dimension, our astral body.
Okay, so let me just jump in there because that's all amazing stuff. The first point that I wanted to kind of bring out is that it's interesting to note that when you and I had the conversations in Vegas and when we went to Arcosanti, the way that you're coming at it and the way you've explained it is you're kind of you have an engineering background. You're more of a scientist and an engineer and a mathematician over being me as like a feeling hippie. You know what I mean?
Well,
I'm going to go through
let me see. Yes, you're right. It is such a relative concept. It's so hilarious. This illustrates the point so perfectly. But from your perspective, I would have an analytical mindset. I would come from a very, in a sense, mathematical or logical perspective, because you're right. In my aviation training and the entrepreneurial stuff I've been doing, it's business and numbers and performance and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's that. But like when it comes to math, I got a D in advanced calculus, and when it comes to I had freshman forgiveness on calculus or on a chemistry that I had to take over because I got a D on it, and it was so bad in my freshman year. And they said, "Oh, well, you just learned how to party, so we'll forgive you for that. You can take it over again and get a B in it or something, right?" So I did. So that is how strong I am in the sciences. And yet, when it comes to the chakras, it's like I started to understand the pattern. And the pattern started to show me, because it reinforced itself, my understanding on how they were applied. I'm able to understand geometries, I'm able to understand math and quantum mechanics, and even now supersymmetric periodic table of elements. And I still don't understand how chemistry works, but I can tell you how to build a supersymmetric periodic table of elements that includes talons, muons, up-down quarks, and all of them. Every single piece, including 4 missing elements that are basically based on a pentaquark. So, right. Again, idiot savant, fifth dimensional Helen Keller when it comes to these things. I can see them, I can write them, I can show them to you. Somebody else needs to explain, well, what do you do with it?
Yeah. Well, and that's like kind of my point was saying, like, the way that you're viewing it isn't your traditional, go to a yoga class, right? You're kind of figuring it out, and that's what like the engineer mindset does. It looks and it finds patterns, and then it pieces things that need to go together, and then you find the information because it's out there, but you're viewing it from a different scope originally to begin with. And so from what I see that you're saying, the way that I'm understanding it is that these chakra systems, let's say energy portals or something, they're what's bringing the matter into the 3D realm so we can feel it, because it's 99.99 empty space, right? So is it, you're saying that these chakra systems are what's holding us into 3D realm, and some person who might be more animalistic or not as evolved, right? Like, whoever that person might be, that's just a stage in their evolution. And then you've got a person who's really highly evolved, intuitive, like the Dalai Lama, for instance, has more of these energy centers activated and is perceiving more of reality in this space, because even you look at the light spectrum, and you and I have talked about this, where we're only perceiving like 3 or 4% of all light, and if that. And so reality is happening now. It's not that it's not happening. It's all happening. We're just not able to perceive it. And so are you linking it to these energy centers or chakras within the body and understanding it that way?
Yeah, the energy centers in the body are, everything has those energy centers in them. And those energy centers are even, on a sense, conceptual, but they are also physical. Like, for example, like this book right here. This book is requiring 7 chakras to give rise to it. The earth, water, fire, these earth, water, fire, and earth. Let's see, earth, water, fire, and earth, water, fire. Those 7, and then the middle one makes air. So that's how you get those 7 make earth, water, fire, and air. Earth, water, fire, and air. So the overlap at that physical form is these gross earth, water, fire, and air. But we are actually, you know, emanating, we're beyond fifth dimensional beings, but we're much more than just third and fourth dimensional beings. And so there's more than just the earth, water, fire, and air. There's the ether that goes on into it. And so what happens is that separates out. And so instead of having just 7 chakras, there's 2 more chakras. That it's like taking this 3-dimensional book, and you've got a chakra up here that's projecting down prana or energy or, you know, high frequency, and you've got another chakra below that's projecting akasha or the low frequency particles, and that's what's giving rise to this 3-dimensional book. So you're go ahead.
So I'm with you. So remember that when you and I were on the phone last week, you know, so within, so without, so above, so below, right? That's what you're touching on. What were you saying about metals? Was it like the highest boiling point and then the lowest, and it ends up being the same? Was it the plasma TVs or something?
Yeah. So that's basically the whole mobius strip of any full spectrum of anything. So in a sense, you've got a full spectrum. If there's like if this is like the high frequency of something, and this is the low frequency of something, okay? So we've got, let's just say that you've got solids, and you've got water, and you've got gas, right? So this is like the frequencies, yes?
And just for people who are listening, you've got just a strip of band in your hand. So this is definitely.
Oh, understood. Sorry, I got you. So okay, gotcha. So imagine, that you've got a strip, and then there's anything in existence. There's a polarity of the highest frequency of that and the lowest frequency of that. The best of it, the worst of it, the most extreme. However you can identify something, there is the most extreme of one end, and there is equally on the other end of the polarity, there is another extreme. And that's very similar to the states of matter. For example, we have solids, liquids, and gases. We're very familiar with those, where the solids are like an ice cube. That's where they're the coldest and the lowest energy state, the lowest frequency. When you add energy into that ice cube that's solid, it turns into water. So it goes into a higher frequency state. There's more energy there. You'd see that the frequency of the water is higher than that of the solid. You add more energy in it, it turns into a gaseous state, and there's more energy in that, high frequency to that. So we've talked about the bottom end is solids, you've got liquids, and then you've got gases. Well, to go to an extreme, if you continue to add energy to gases like that water, it goes from a gas into what's called plasma. So plasma is basically a gas that is now coherent to electricity. So it'll respond to the electromagnetic spectrum rather than gases, which was, if you send a charge through it, nothing happens. When you have plasma, that's where plasma televisions come in and stuff like that. You can now, not only you have this high intensity gas that's going on in there that's now a plasma state, you can beam energy, electricity into it, and it will respond accordingly. And you manipulate it, you learn how to manipulate the plasma, and that's how you get different colors, so you get it to maneuver around or do anything. So that's that coherence. That's on the top end of the spectrum. So what's very interesting is if you take that cold, solid ice cube and you freeze it down closer to Kelvin, it becomes what's called a Bose-Einstein Condensate. And now that is ultra low frequency. Remember, we went up from the solid to the liquid to the gas, the frequency is getting higher, and you get into plasma, it's super high. Well, when you go from liquid to solid to Bose-Einstein Condensate, it's ultra low. Like the frequency of the universe is 2 hertz, right? So the idea is that this Bose-Einstein Condensate begins to behave differently than a solid. And what's very interesting is that at both ends of these spectrums, it begins to behave just like a plasma. You can start to send energy into it, and it starts to be coherent and behave just like plasma did on the high end of the frequency. And so what's interesting is that if you take and I'm going to do this visually, but I'll try to talk us through it also, is that if you have the high end of the frequency and the low end of the frequency, and you have them on a strip of paper, and you hold that paper out, it appears that the high frequency and the low frequency are the farthest thing apart, the whole end of the polarity. But what's very interesting is that when you bring those 2 ends of the spectrum together, I'm bringing this bringing into a ring, so that way the top end and the bottom and come together and touch. It's because, like looking at here, in the middle we have this water state. Over here, lower we go is solid, and we have over here Bose-Einstein Condensate. On the other hand, we had the water, gas, and plasma, and this is where the two ends behave identical, the Bose-Einstein Condensate. So even though they were the opposite end of the spectrums, they actually behave identical. And what's very interesting, and the twist to this plot, is that when you take this strip and you have a ring, this is just two sides. This is like it's showing good and bad. And when you take this end of the string and you join it together, there is this good side and the bad side. There is the plasma side and there's the Bose-Einstein Condensate side. But if you just twist it once, what you get is called a mobius strip. So that this ultra high frequency, and you twist it so that it meets this ultra low frequency, now the two ends, if you put your finger on there and you run it through, now there's only one side to this. This is called the mobius strip. So that way you go from plasma and you run it around and it comes over and it becomes Bose-Einstein Condensate. It runs around, it becomes plasma, and it runs around, it becomes Bose-Einstein Condensate. So this is the way all polarities in existence work. Whether it is Republican Democrat, whether it is, you know, good and bad, whether it is God and ego, it doesn't matter. The full ends of the spectrums behave as if they appear on the spectrum. When you cut them in half and you just look at them in duality, they appear to be farthest things apart. But when you consider them in non-duality, in their Mobius strip, they are exactly, there's no breaking point between the middle of that to this end, and you can't even tell the difference.
Right. Yeah. So that's amazing. And it's so for everyone listening, it's definitely a challenge for me to keep up to that, because it's heavy and it's interesting. You know, the way that I'm kind of understanding it is that you look at a Zen master, right? And they talk about non-duality, you know what I mean? They talk about, you know, if you're stuck in this right, wrong, good, bad, up, down scenario, you're stuck in this perception of reality, right? So you must so you have to have an enemy, then you can go fight him. You know, that guy's bad, stay away from him, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like that's keeping you into a level of awareness that you keep perpetuating. And because you don't have these higher states, let's say, of awareness or energy centers or experiences, but from this, you know, understanding, you're kind of getting it to more of a scientific understanding of our own mental nature, because it's really just a frequency band that's growing up. So with this information that you're sharing, do you have anything that you've come across to kind of like, what I kind of see is like, by understanding this and just allowing this heavier information, this denser information, just to roll it around in your nugget, it's going to make like stupid shit in your daily life become less important. You know what I mean? If somebody cuts you off and you realize it's a duality nature, and there's this huge, massive spectrum of being conscious, of being alive, and you're understanding more about your infinite 5D, 6D, 12D, whatever the heck it is, nature, then you don't have to worry about that stupid shit. But do you have any, you know, let's say processes for activating these things? Like, you know, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about how the more information you have around something, it's going to bring more effect. So one of the studies he talked about was these house cleaners. No, what are they? Just a cleaner, right? You clean hotel rooms, maids or something. And he there's a group, and they said, hey, you know, you're burning these many calories. So it's like your workout. Every time you go to work, you're actually working out. And the group of women that he said that to ended up losing more weight, getting more fit, and all this kind of stuff, because they believed and they had this information around, oh, we're actually working out when we're at work. As to the other people that they had in the test group, they didn't say anything and they didn't really get any improvements. So that's one of the ways that I see that I can apply this information, is just by bringing it in. And I guess my question is, with all of this stuff, have you figured out ways to either activate and open these energy centers to, you know, like processes that we could use? And the one thing that I remember, because I know we talked about this a lot, I was like, Sean, man, you're breaking my brain. Like, how the hell do I use this shit? you talked about moving through experiences, like we have these chakras that are open these experiences. And when we have something that, that's a challenge, right? And we feel angry, and we feel upset, and we don't move through it. We don't let it like go through that energy center. It gets caught like a what is
filter. Yeah, it becomes a filter.
Right. So you can explain a little bit of that, but also, for knowing these things, and we're mapping reality a little bit more. We're mapping awareness a little bit more, and it's going to be tough to understand at first. So I'm just wondering if you have any kind of info for, like, you've got this information, and how could you maybe apply these chakra systems, maybe activating them, maybe just being aware of them, or anything along those lines.
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing that comes to mind on how to activate these or utilize these or incorporate these things like into your life, I have been a big utilizer of the Vipassana meditation operation. They've got an organization out there that has over 140 locations where you can go and meditate for, it's donation only stuff. So, you don't have to, you're broke, you don't have to pay anything, and they put you up out there for 10 days, 10-hour day of meditation, and you learn what's basically called insight meditation. So it's just a very clear kind of meditation where it's not mantra based, it's not, you're not learning any kind of religion aspect of it, although at night there's a discussion about the fundamental Buddhism aspects, but the process of Vipassana meditation helps you clear your mind. It helps you get centered. It helps you stop the disruption of all of the frequencies and signals that are coming through the electromagnetic spectrum, through your emotional spectrum, through all of the different ways. And it shows you how to get clear so that you can actually start to perceive these things yourself without these distortions in it. So Vipassana meditation would be definitely one way.
And just Vipassana is a really good tip. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question. So we talk about distortions, and I've heard this a lot with a lot of the stuff that I've read, and it's like this mental filter. Could you equate that to any kind of maybe chakra system, or have an experience, right? I have a challenging experience. My dad said something to me, and it's upset me. Now, because I've had that experience in that energy center, wherever it hits me in the body, lower, middle, heart, whatever, and I've got this like memory now, through my filter system stuck there. And so now, is that how you would relate? Like,
keep talking, dude. I don't need to talk. Keep talking. You're on it. I'm going to go back over this, but you're on it, man.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I would see. So rather than having a clear like experience so that you can just kind of learn from it, because your last boyfriend was a dick and did this experience, you've held on to that memory. So now it's messing up future scenarios because you didn't work through that experience that you had. And so now you've got all these different energy centers responsible for different experiences. And then I guess we can kind of go into the tree of life. How do you break down the tree of life? You've got, do you know that? I think you do. It's like self, family, career, I don't know, the whole tree. You want to go into
a whole other subject for that, but really more to the I think, significant point that you were on, which is the concept of chakras and filters and the process of how those filters actually accumulate. And then that's what you were describing is that process of accumulation and how they become this dirty lens. And so, but there is a process of going, and it's basically alchemy. Basically what we're talking about is the process of, it's a fountain of youth thing. It is the philosopher's stone. It is the process of alchemy, and then turning that alchemy on yourself and then becoming eternally youthful. And so this is exactly how that works. What you were describing was a very good description of how the chakras are the incoming and outgoing of the energy and how they become these filters. Let's just say this. When you're born, your chakra systems are coming in with genetically your predisposed filters that are on them. They're basically pretty clean because you're not having any physical experience in here. So consider yourself as this tuning fork. And this is your tuning fork right here. And your chakras are the full spectrum from literally the ultra low end of your tuning fork to the, what we perceive in duality is the top one up here to your Sahasrara, the ultra high frequency, okay? This is the full electromagnetic spectrum, and this is how you send and receive signals with the full spectrum. Now, I can show you the full non-dual spectrum because your antenna is really up there. Your really the way it's your physical ones, your 4 lower chakras plus your heart chakra are your material, your body. Your 4 lower conscious chakras, so your Indu, your Manas, your Ajna, and your Vishuddha chakra, those 4, earth, water, fire, air, subtle, and your Anahata, or your heart chakra, those are your emotional body and your soul. And then there is your, up in your head, there is 4 up in here, your Indu, Nirvana, Guru, and Sahasrara. Those 4 are your intellectual, and then up on the top is your spiritual. So you have your 4 bodies: spirit, intellectual, and ego, your emotional, soul, and your physical body. Those 4 bodies blended together are your etheric 5-dimensional being spirit, okay? 5D, monad, spirit, moon sign gives rise to your earth, water, fire, and air forms of bodies. Does that make sense? And this is all based on that chakra and your tuning fork. Your low frequency, the bottom end of your frequency, is your physical form. Here it is. This is earth. This is matter. That's you know your emotional body, the thing that feels when you're talking. You hear those words in your voice, and the things that feel differently than the words in your voice, or the words in your head, is your feeling body. And that's the stuff that's going on in these upper subtle chakras. And then your intellectual chakras are taking place up in here, and your spiritual chakras are up in there. And all of us are walking around like these antennas. And your antennas come over, and my antennas like we're ants. And we communicate like that. And we communicate like that with the same cup. I physically communicated with it to be able to bring these, all of these things are electromagnetically brought through. I'm not touching any one of these things. You said there's 99% of is air, right? So I'm not touching this cup, but I'm electromagnetically aligning with all of the different little chakras, the little chakra patterns of the cup, which is its own chakra system, but then the chakra system of every different molecule, and the chakra system of every different atom, and the chakra system of every different quark, and of every different electron. Every one has its own little chakra systems, and they're all spinning around, whirling around, all interacting with each other electromagnetically, synchronously, in one morphogenic field.
So when we're talking about the chakras and you're saying moon sign and things like that, astrology, is what's happening out in space a map for our internal reality, and how is it like a mirror creation?
As within, so without, and it is so beautiful. This is how I've been able to map this out, this existential cartography, looking at how do you map out all of existence. And if I'm using the as within, so without rule, this here, are you able to see the upper portion? There we go. Okay, so you can see that this has a bottom and then a reflected top part, okay? As below, so above. As within, so without. And so if I am the center of that, if I consider my event horizon of my body, the within is on the inside of my skin and without is out here. So then if I'm organism, outside of me is planet and inside of me is cellular level. If I go further out, the planet is part of this solar system. And if I go within, the cell is comprised of these atoms. And so the solar system and atomic structure look very similar to the way they behave. Similarly, a cell and a planet. You do a slice of the planet, you look at a planet like this, you do a side cut of a cell, they look just like they're organized. So it's organized the same as you're going within from a cell to your atoms, you're going without from the planet to the solar system. And I'm sure you could draw the conclusions on where that goes.
Right. And so the way that I'm this is fun for my brain.
It goes planet, solar, galactic, universe. And the same way I go within cellular, atomic, subatomic, electron. So it's basically the planets and the cells are connected. Planets and cells, these are the air. The fire is the atoms and the solar system, and then you've got the galaxies and the quarks, and then you've got the universe and the electrons, and they are perfectly balanced, as within, so without. So you can structure this, you know, and then each one of those has their subsections. I mean, each planet has its phases in that to look at.
Well, what this is reminding me of is there's a video on YouTube, and those of you listening or watching this can Google it. I think it's the smallest, he goes the smallest to the biggest, and it maps out, you know, how far we can go in with a microscope and what it looks like. Quarks, what is the smallest thing that we know? I don't know, something.
Well, Planck level, the Planck.
Yeah, and then it kind of zooms out, and then it gets to matter, what we can see with our eye, and then it starts to zoom out, and it does the, you know, the cities, planet, then it gets into solar system, galaxy. And it's interesting that the 2 points, once again, they look the exact same. And so it does, you know, hold true to that theory that it is balanced out. And the way that why I'm loving this is because for me, it's understanding it more, and like all the stuff that I kind of researched when, you know, like you're drawn into one way of understanding the universe. And I think that it's always been said that there's so many different ways, there's so many paths to the way home. And I see that our path is the same in this understanding. And the way that my path was through more of the Zen understanding. And, you know, it talks about a lot about, you know, we are the observer, we are the creator experiencing itself. As a separate illusion of Matt or Sean or whoever, right? But when you're mapping it this way, kind of scientifically, it makes me really realize that more, because you're going out and you're talking about like all these little tiny pieces of matter, but it fundamentally keeps going to this same thing of this awareness state. And like, who is observing all of these things? Who's creating this circumstance? So like does this get into like any kind of so, well, actually I'll see if I can make a more solid point on that, a more complete thought. But I remember one of the things that I heard or came across once was that when we come to this planet, if we want to ascend to a higher realm, let's say, you know what I mean, and stop coming back the karmic cycle and doing it again and again and again, you need to be above 50% positive. That means above 50% being a dickhead. You know, above 50%, you're not worried about how do I get that sale and just stuff this guy into a car, as I was in car sales. I couldn't do that. Or stuff something down someone's throat where maybe it's not great for them. 50% of I'm gonna just try to help my family, my community. I want to have, you know, Buddhism is so great, you know, they got it mapped out, right? Speech, right action, right livelihood. Like, just, it's not complicated. Just see how you can serve your community and surroundings. So I don't know if you remember what you said when I said that, but you understood that in a way that I was like, that's wild. Do you remember that when I gave that? So if you get above 50% positive,
yes, right,
you can go to a new, let's say, playing ground, because the more I'm understanding of all this stuff, the more I'm like, I have to be in some sort of weird holographic illusion, you know, a really, really awesome virtual reality, you know, it's next level.
Right. Well, let me say that I can very easily understand a perspective that identifies that 50-yard line kind of thing, and the idea of crossing that as the move into the next stage, because that's exactly what happens in evolutionary stages. This area in here, and again, I don't know. Can you see this spot right in here? Just a minute.
Yeah, I got you.
So this is the point. You can see this is the top of the head of this, and this is the bottom of the head for here. Okay. So so what happens is this is your chakra system that we're describing. This is your body, and these chakras right here are basically the ones that we think of as ourselves autonomously. What these other ones are, though, really is that we're running around in non-duality, and we actually have this reflection on all these chakras that are going on of our entangled twin, our entangled partner over there. Well, let me see. I do want to get back onto the right course of what we're talking about.
Percent positive.
Thank you. Right. So the idea is this area right here. this becomes the system. Our body is the system. So this is the within to the without, or the below to the above. This is the 50-yard line, as it were, okay? So what happens is that all cycles will go through where they build up, and they'll build up over these earth, water, fire, air cycles. And really, it's like first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear. First gear comes in, the earth cycle comes in, and it starts out rolling. And then after, and this I'm going to talk about, like, basically how the Kali Yugas or the Golden Ages, or all these cycles are referred to. But in many of these wisdom systems, it's basically broken up that the first perfect age is 40% of a cycle. The next is 30% of a cycle. The third phase is 20% of a cycle. And the last cycle, Kali Yuga, the crappy cycle of the whole thing, the Iron Age, is 10% of whatever the whole cycle is going to be. So that first cycle that starts out, it starts out, you know, first 40% starts out going. And then somewhere down the road, the second 30% starts rolling and it unfolds. And then somewhere down the road, the third 20% starts unfolding. And then the fourth 10% starts unfolding. But then that 10% elapses, and then it closes in reverse order. The 20% collapses, the 30% collapses, and then finally you complete the 40%. It is the idea of the last one, the first one in is the last one out. Mm-hmm. So if I took a ball number 1 and I put it in my stomach, and I put ball number 2 in my stomach, and then ball number 3, 4, 5, and then I brought them back out, 5's coming out, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? That's exactly what happened with Kronos, by the way. Kronos swallowed his children as they were being born. The earth one, the water one, the fire one, the air one, he swallowed them one at a time. Hephaestus and Artemis and not Artemis, who was previous to Venus, whatever. So he goes through the water, earth, water, fire, and he gets to Zeus, and instead of swallowing Zeus, he puts the umpalos. Hera tricks him with a stone, and he swallows the stone, and he thinks that he swallowed the lightning thief, the king, and so Zeus goes down, and he actually lives, and he comes back, and he fights Kronos. They have a battle, and when Zeus wins, he forces Kronos to regurgitate everything. So first he it's the last one in was the first one out. So the umpalos, the replacement stone, comes out first. That's the navel of the universe stored at Delphi, Greece. And then comes in reverse order his brothers and sisters until the first one comes out. And I'm sorry, Hephaestus wasn't his brother. It's a whole generation of that. But the point is that the earth, water, fire ones, all of Zeus's brothers and sisters now alive again, and it comes out in that order. And that's because of the same way that the planets evolve and all that stuff. They all evolve. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then it zips itself back up. Ether, air, fire, water, earth, and it just goes through these cycles: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And so this is bringing up something for me. I remember we were having again a conversation, and it was about Greek mythology and all of these people, and you had an interesting concept on that, and saying like you know a lot about the Greek mythology and each individual person. That some of them I was aware of, some of them I didn't. Were there links to these stories, or was it kind of like they're the same creation story, almost like you could almost use it as like another Bible or like another thing?
Absolutely.
You want to talk about some of the similarities, or
they are all archetypes.
Yes,
every mythology and every religion is a collection of archetypes. And each generation, each wave has been gone. Earth, which is the first; water, which is second; fire, which is third; air, which is fourth. And we're now basically in the ether experience. Consider ourselves ether bunnies. But so each of these orders have come with their own set of archetypes. So that when you look at the pantheon of the Assyrians, and you look at the basics, they had not evolved that far along. So there's a fundamental tetrahedral actually relationship to that pantheon. And then you look at the next order when the mythology of the Greeks the Egyptians come along, and the Mayans, it becomes more evolved, and they're basically, you know how they say Horus is Jesus? How they say, Jesus, and he raised after 3 days and was born on the December 25th, and yet you can look at, Horus, and you can look at all these different ones, that the mythros of having the what is it when they revive themselves? Reborn.
Rebirth. Yeah, you just broke my brain with everyone.
The idea of where you're reborn again, whatever the heck. But the idea, that's all because each order has its own Christ. It has its own archetype of that, and they just evolved to a slightly more complex. The Earth ones are a very fundamental, primordial sense of archetypes. The water ones have a little bit more depth to them. Here, look at the Greeks is the perfect way to look at it. You had the primordial, where the fundamental ones of sky, of night, of darkness, and that was primordials. The next second generations was the Titans, and they were a bit more humanistic, and but they were still almost giants and clumsy.
What do you mean by primordials exactly?
Primordial is their very first order, like the stuff that is night,
Gotcha.
is air, is the things that are very abstract and are not, personal whatsoever. They are primordial, and that's where the term primordial comes. Is they are the primordial, and so they almost define that term. We look at them and we say, oh, they're not developed into the later stages of complexity of human form. They're still talking about night and day, death, fear, strife, abstract, non-personal, right? Yeah. So then the next generation is these are the Titans, and they come about. They're the second generation. That's the water stage, and they are more humanistic. I mean, you can think of them, but they are the giants too, and they're more clumsy and more crude, right? And they have their stories, and then the next wave comes through, which is going from Kronos to Zeus's era, and you've got fire. This is when you've got animals. These are animalistic type of individuals, and so they have personalities. And you can look at the gods of those things are gods of things that are much more humanistic in a sense. When you go from the Olympians to the Romans, which is the fourth order, the air, which is when the Abrahamic and the Judaism comes into play, and so we go from the Greeks to the Romans, and from the fire into the air phase, they become hyper complex. When we said that Aphrodite becomes Venus, she doesn't just become Venus. Aphrodite quickens up and basically becomes there's other Aphrodites running around in other existences, and Highlander Venus comes along and she absorbs all of the energy of Aphrodite plus these other Aphrodite forms, archetypes that are coming into existence. Like when you read Homer and Hesiod and a couple of these other Greek historians, and they have conflicting stories of why Zeus would often did this and had these children, but then Homer says he actually went off and had these children and mated with this and begat that. It's not that they're wrong. It's that Hesiod's looking at one Mandela effect timeline, and Homer is looking at another Mandela is looking at the Berenstain Bears timeline and describing what happened over there. And there's actually a quickening one where Zeus became Jupiter, and Jupiter's timeline is the predominant one that's here now. The Roman timeline, and Zeus got quickened up into. So Zeus's timeline, wherever he was from, is now part of Jupiter's timeline, and he becomes like just one of Zeus's past lives or alternate timelines that's giving rise to the greater Jupiter. And that's what goes on with each of these archetypes. They become more and more complex. The Zeus, as being the center of his fire pantheon, is a complex dude. Very sexual and very powerful in his late days and stuff like that, but he was still a dude. Then you get into Jupiter, and shit gets complex. I mean, they just start, they start outplaying each other, and it's like, oh my gosh. Because that's the idea of air, the fire sign, and they just, it's all crazy. And that's why that last era Yuga falls apart on itself, because it's all based on ideas and it's not grounded here in the physical form. So back to what our original point was, is that all of those mythologies, all of the reason why I went on, I didn't understand anything about mythologies until like December of 2012. And then I just started reading Wikipedia, really, and then I started ordering some books and reading this stuff. But I was tuning into the universal archetypes, and each chakra is an archetype. And you can identify the different chakras and the different archetypes that are associated with it. And what happens is if you identify in yourself, this is, I call archetypal evolution. So if you identify that certain archetypes are playing out in your life for good, for better, or for worse, you can go and learn about what that archetype did in history and mythology and religion or whatever. You might be the Christ figure, you might be the Hephaestus figure, you might be the Venetian, you might be whatever, Luciferian. But you look at these things and you can go and read the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these things, because each one of these archetypes has equal value to it when used in the awakened state. Luciferian energy and a Luciferian archetype applied consciously is equally as powerful and important and significant and effective as Christ archetype access. But the thing is that Christ archetype accessed unconsciously naturally does the good parts of it. It's that there's shadow aspects of the Christ consciousness that if you embody the Christ consciousness unconsciously, you get this Messiah complex or this, whatever else, the shadow aspects that go with that kind of stuff. So, any one of these archetypes can come with its double-edged sword. All of them are double-edged swords. And when you learn that you've got, like, if you're behaving Luciferian and you're doing it unconsciously, that's kind of destructive. But if you learn about the strengths of these different archetypes of the stories that goes on with Lucifer, you learn, don't do that when you're Lucifer. And man, Lucifer should have done this. Instead, when you get to find yourself in a story where you make those decisions, you can do this in an enlightened way and say, don't do that, Lucifer. Or Loki. Loki's a great one. Don't fucking do the stupid Loki shit. Do the good Loki shit. So,
right. Man, yeah, that was heavy. I dig it. I stay with you most of that point. I was gonna say, when we're talking about these archetypes, some of my work specifically with people and coaching and things like that, what I recognize, and especially with doing more of these heart journey therapies that I'm doing, and the deeper work as I evolve my own consciousness, and I just kind of go in. I think that anybody doing any kind of healing or therapy or coaching, if you just have an intention to serve the other person, that's like really good. You know what I mean? You might not even be a business coach, but if you sit down with somebody that actually gives a shit about you and they have no business coaching, they'll probably give you the best advice. Yeah. So, that's what I tune into with my coaching, but because I'm getting to new levels through my disciplines and practices and conversations and things like that, I'm able to have more of a positive impact, which is great. And so, looking at something like this, I'm kind of seeing like people have very similar problems, of like we all have, we're talking about archetypes or, the struggles we deal with, right? Like if your wife has left you, somebody else's wife has probably left them. If you are struggling with somewhere in business, somebody's probably struggled with that business. If your friend is a dick, somebody else's friend was a dick too. If you don't know what your purpose is right now when you're trying to find your way, guaranteed there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people or archetypes or experiences. And all of these experiences kind of get uploaded into the Akashic records, which is something that I think that you can talk about as well. And I believe that you spoke about this, and I think that you said that we've all played out these archetypes, like we all have an opportunity. And that's where I really see this 3D realm or this learning ground of Earth and history and Rome is like an opportunity of like how cool it would have been and what we would have learned as a human or a spirit to come down in Roman days. And so all these archetypes are things that are within us, that when we understand them and have full spectrum understanding, right? Because just when you talked about the liquid and the elements, right? We see good and bad or light and dark, when really you flip it and do the mobius strip and it's the same thing. It's all part of the whole, but you're seeing it from one end or another and you're viewing it as something bad. But when you understand it more and you get full understanding of it, like you said, a Luciferian archetype or a Christ archetype or whatever, it's an understanding, but only with a half understanding. That's when you get like, the whole Superman or Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, if you're just Spider-Man and you haven't sorted out other things and you just go around and you're gonna muck it up, you got to be able to hold that amount of energy.
Yeah.
And you got something loaded up over there. So what are you going to go into?
Yeah, no. I'll respond to that first. Yeah, the idea of the archetypes that are within us, that's a very Jungian thing, by the way, archetypes, and accessing these archetypes. And this is, I think, the key to understanding ourselves. And again, you can come and if you're identifying with, a Lilith type of archetype, or even like, the Hulk type of archetype, you can, watch movies or read books, or, watch cartoons even, and read comic books. I learned so much about the Vedas from Amit AKC. There's a comic series that's been around for like decades, and I learned most of my Vedic mythology through reading these comic books. And then I can go and apply these comic books to Amarchita Kothra is what they're called. And I was able to learn, all these different archetypes. And now I see these archetypes like Indra or Narayana or any one of these archetypes, especially like Shiva and Brahma and Vishnu and all those. I'm able to understand these archetypes as they come up with me, because they're just as valid. Even though we were raised in these North American, and Abrahamic type of systems, we're still, our genetics deep down within are affected by all of the different earth, water, fire, air, eons that we come from. And so coming to understand these Vedic archetypes is nearly as important as it is to understand the Judeo-Christian ones and the Islamic ones, or coming to understand which I love, the Greek ones and the eras like the Zoroastrian and Persian and stuff like that. Those eras are fun to learn and great to learn. But all of those things are caught up within us. In that book that I showed before, Leia Yoga, goes into that. It describes all of the different, like in each chakra, which archetype is housed within each of those archetypes, and how to go and access those, and how to interface with them. So it's just an amazing resource. Again, Leia Yoga by Shyam Sundar Goswami. So.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about that on your screen there?
Yeah, sure. So this was kind of talking about, this is very similarly related to that chakra pattern that we're working on in here, but this is what I call a quadratic transform. It's based on, you can see in here, it's the above, below, Vesica Pisces, so the circle above, and the circle below, and the circle within, and the circle without. So what this is kind of showing is where there's an overlap of the within above, or the without below. And as I was starting to look at this, you were talking about the intention. Here is this intentional field over here, and that is the within below. In a sense, this below field, as I've gone through and sorted things out, the area of below is the area of particles, and the area of above is also the area of waves, like energy waves. So you have, on the area within, you have these pranic particles, and without, you have these akashic particles. So the particles that we're so used to seeing in our world of reality are these particles of akasha. And that's just matter, if you want to look at it that way. And these akashic particles are powered by these waves from above, these magnetic waves on the outside, and these electric waves from the inside. Again, this is the within, and this is electricity. And that electricity comes from within. And then this is the without, and the energy waves that comes from the environment to the surface of us, the magnetic waves, are these energy waves from without. And that comes to us, and it powers these particles below. Again, the internal powering of the particles is these neutrinos, which is the intentional field that you were talking about. And that's why I brought this up, is to point out is that this intentional field is very much the same as the electrical field and the magnetic field. And then there's the emotional field. And all of them are direct reflections. Each of these lines in here are like mirrors. And so whenever you set an intention here, it reflects over here in the magnetic field, it reflects over here in the electrical field, and it reflects over here in the emotional field on basically a logarithmic scale. One little ounce of intention is 10 ounces of magnetism and charm, is 100 ounces of desire and will and electricity, is 1,000 ounces of emotion and electron charge that's going on over here. And it's not just namby-pamby, oh, look at how cute it would be if it was 10 times this and the next one would be 10. No, I can show you. And another, maybe I have it on here. No, it was not in this section. But no.
This is kind of like, you know, again, you know, following along with you and watching this is super interesting. And what it really brings up for me is, you know, you are the universe experiencing itself. You know, you are you are every single thing, and everything that you do affects every other thing, but mostly you are the free will of the universe experiencing all things, and you're just mapping it in such an interesting way that just brings more awareness to my own existence, and more let's say like responsibility, because I know that like my universe, my atom or whatever it is, my little fractal, it affects all other things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an interesting way to map it.
Yes, agreed. Very agreed. Very agreed. I appreciate the reflection for sure, and the mapping. It is honestly all I'm doing is drawing down the journey of self-discovery because I'm seeing it, and I'm trying to reflect it, you know, to quantum mechanics and to mythologies and all these things. So I'm trying to make up the least amount of it and just trying to piece it together. And you know, and that's why in many cases it resonates with people, is because I'm trying to be as accurate with my own, you know, what I'm seeing within myself and how I'm relating it to what's going on outside of myself. And if it's without, if that's what's going on in those little atoms and stuff, and that's what's going on that they're seeing over there, then it's got to be going on within me. Right. And so that's again where I come back to the Vipassana meditation. It provides the ability to have the insight to go within and be comfortable with what you're finding in there. You know, because some of it at the beginning is very personal. You can experience these energies as, you know, your own self or your own demons or whatever the heck. But Vipassana meditation, you just kind of learn how to go in there and just see it as energy, and then you just kind of learn to sit with it, and you just see what's going on without, and you start imagining, in a sense, okay, I know they tell me as without, and I see that they're talking about, you know, quantum mechanics over here and the Greeks over there. What is that? Oh, look at that. Hey, look at those Greeks over there. Look at that quantum mechanics in there. Oh, wow, interesting. You know?
Yeah. Well, like you said, I think that the important thing is that we are all on a journey of self-discovery of what is actually happening. You know, one of my favorite things to say all the time is like, we really don't know what's going on. Like, we haven't even mapped out, you know, a bit of this, and to think that we know for sure, we don't, but we're just constantly expanding and growing. And as one person maps out their reality honestly and their own authenticity, they have value for the entire whole, because it's getting uploaded to the Akashic records, and then we can add it. But the thing is to do it authentically, because there's no way that I'm going to figure out who I am through that route at this time, but I can learn through openness, and you know, getting to that level, be like, holy, show me this, and I can learn from that. And that's your expression. And then there are things that from me doing my unique expression that you can see like, oh, interesting. And because we're just mirrors of each other, as you know, and the same thing as you're mapping out the universe, it's just this consistent growth and information and self-discovery, right? The archetypes, all of that kind of stuff. Yep. So my friend, it's been an amazing pleasure again. I just wanted to see if there's anything that you wanted to add before closing, or if you wanted to talk about any updates with Delphi, or anything that you wanted to do before you got to head off.
Well, I guess there's a couple of things I could close with that'd be kind of interesting to just throw out, because I love these kind of conversations, and I'm looking forward to having, you know, a number of different types. That diagram that I threw up there, the quadratic transform, I think I've got a couple of different versions of it, and one of my assistants that works with me has been able to use it and take it into places where I've not even used it. And I think it would be pretty cool to have Sanan and myself get up there and have a conversation with you about it, because he's applying it in his everyday life, and that's really, you know, I think the great value, because we were talking about it, and a lot of the stuff where I see great value on all the esoteric stuff. So, but he's really gone through, and I listened to him when he describes how he applies it to these things, and I think it's very helpful for somebody to see how to utilize it and apply it in their life, because once they do, they start seeing these patterns that are basically universal, and it's almost like a gateway to understanding or opening the door to all these concepts we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, with what you're pulling in and offering and understanding, it's, as you've said, it's new for you. Sometimes you come in, you're like, oh my God, like, okay, I'm seeing this, I'm mapping it out. I don't exactly know what to do with it, but I'm mapping it out. Even the way you have your globe mapped out with the poles and all this different type of information.
Right.
And then, it's like having a tool, almost like, we're cavemen, and you figured yourself, and you got a hammer. And you're like, I saw this hammer, and like, if I do this with the top, and then I do this, then it allows me to do this.
Yeah.
But I have this thing in my hand, and then somebody else in the community just picks it up and starts whacking, and you're like, oh shit, you can do that with it. No kidding.
That's it. That's exactly it. I have some practical applications for it, and they're handy and stuff like that. But when like the supersymmetric periodic table of elements, my gosh, and when that actually finally strikes the right person that can understand what happens when they get the perfection of what a periodic table can and should look like, then they're going to know what doors that unlocks, because I don't know what the limitations are because of the problems with the current table and the current understanding. I don't get what their problems are, but when I am able to present to them in an effective, clear manner a supersymmetric periodic table, and they're able to take it and go, oh shit, because that fixes this. That's where this is really, that's the value of this kind of stuff. So
yeah, awesome, brother. Well,
so there's one more thing I do want to mention, and just for the tail end of this kind of, it's kind of fun. So this kind of stuff is what I really love to do, and the whole existential cartography and figuring this stuff out. So, but really, I don't get to do that all the time. What I mostly get to do is we're developing basically a destination eco resort right outside of Las Vegas. It's a music festival theme park that is also an emergent technology incubator and showcase. So that is what we've been working on. There's a lot of movement there. We're in the process of acquiring the town of Calnev Air, Nevada, which is an air park. We're looking at building an air museum. It's got a casino down there. So that stuff is all moving along. If you have any interest in all of that crazy stuff that we just talked about, either just the last few minutes or the whole hour, you can look at Delphi2016.com, DELPHI 2016.com, or you can go to some of my more personal crazy stuff on the web, which is at fiction.com, FICTSEAN.com, and that'll get you to all sorts of rabbit holes.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I love that. And, just before we close, we had another podcast. Hopefully you guys have seen it or watched it, Delphi Village. It's a couple podcasts ago. So
yep.
I gave it a title like A Permanent Burning Man or something like that.
Yep.
But, that project is the reason why I came down and met you in Vegas. And
yep.
I'm working with a company right now called Immortal, and they're creating a super tea and a super coffee, and they're doing it with sacred botanicals, and it's got all these ingredients, and it's amazing. And it's a pain in the mother effing ass because they're doing it the right way. And that's kind of what I see with what you guys do with Delphi Village is you're doing it right. You see a big opportunity, you can make Disneyland. That's all great. Well and good. Kids are happy, but there's a bigger vision that people are asking for. How can we use a place that people would want to go to, not a all-inclusive vacation where you get drunk, but like, something like Burning Man where it's taking music and it's taking also all of those elements that we're talking about, sustainability, showcasing all these technologies that exist and that are out there and showing them to the world and creating also an amazing experience. That's like, holy smokes, I went to Delphi Village. It was out of this world. And so it's a massive project. So I understand in depth because I stayed with you for like a month and still didn't get all the way down to the bottom of it, but I was at least able to see the impact that this will have when it's live and the model of it. If we can, pop them up like Starbucks across the planet, like put one up in Canada and you have this amazing experience, but it's an eco experience and also tech and everything else. and then that can expand outward. Kind of like when we went down to Arco Santi with Rob Jameson, he's trying things on a very small level, so then we can implement them on a big level and just kind of disperse that information out as quickly as possible. So surely an amazing initiative, amazing project. So anyone listening that's got resources, help, information, get on it.
Yeah, 2016.com.
Yeah, we got to build the new earth, man. It's not going to be built for us. It's, we're doing it individually within our own lives, and then collectively when we're called and we see something that we want to contribute to.
Yeah.
Okay, brother. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the episode, share it, say hi on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But that's it. We'll see you next week.
Aloha. Thank you.
Peace, buddy.